fact, the news is exhausting, especially when you've got folks like Elon Musk running around doing wild things. It's tough to keep track of the headlines. So while this isn't going to be that, got a couple things I want to touch on, so let's get into it. Welcome back to Outsider Information here on Versify. I am your host, Brandon, and your strategic partner here with OIAS. As always, like, subscribe, and engage if there's anything here that resonates. We do have an Instagram page that is coming. It is up, nothing on it, but we will hard launch that with everything on June 2nd. I have got my drink of the episode, a raspberry tea. It is never too late in the day for hot tea, so I will always kick back to that. Looks like we've got Luna hanging out in the background. She will act as our supervising producer for this episode. Okay, so what are we getting into? Elon Musk was one of the first articles that I wrote about, and I'm sure we've all got Elon fatigue. He's been way too visible, way too many spots, and I think a lot of us just don't like the guy. But the article that I wrote was why we should be hoping for him to fail. And this was right after he took over Twitter. And it's not that I want him to fail. I don't know him. My opinion of him is negative. And my opinion of him is negative because I just don't like how he treats people. It's not a political thing. He's been a pretty marginal person for quite some time. So, that being said, I was hoping for him to fail because we live in a copycat society. If he was successful in purging the Twitter workforce and reinventing the company into something wildly successful, other companies would have did it. And that isn't good for the American worker. We need people working. We want people working. We need people to have opportunities to do so. And when companies have a chance to save money, they'll do it. So this was good. Him failing with Twitter was excellent. But there's a whole lot more kind of in this whole package. Elon itself is a really sad story. And it's not a pathetic sad story. It's actually a really sad story. When you listen to him talk about his childhood, wasn't a great childhood. Bullied, some home issues, beat up. Not just bullied, but beat up by other kids. There is no way that stuff like that could happen and it not be impactful to your development and ultimately what shapes you as an adult. I'm not going to psychoanalyze Elon. We don't have enough time for all that. I'm also not qualified. But I will say that we all want to be liked and accepted on the surface. And what we're seeing a lot with these shifts towards different political ideologies is if one group doesn't like you the way that you want, you can pivot to another that will like you in the way that you want. Again, it's all about being liked, but don't think for a second that if those other people who used to like him, in this case Elon, would like him again, he would happily take all those adulations. So that's really what it's about. But the other thing with that is we all have inflection points when it comes to trauma. And I say that as somebody who was raised by single mom. Dad was just out of the picture, divorced, and bailed. Somewhere around 13, 14, I hit an inflection point that basically said to me how I was going to move on. And it happens differently for everybody, right? You can definitely list divorce as a form of trauma that you have to overcome. And where I went with it was different than somebody else would go with it. I bring that up to say that when you talk about someone like an Elon Musk, where he was bullied, he was beat up, he maybe didn't have the best home situation, even if he had the money. At a certain point, you become what you want to become. And he clearly chose his path. And that is what I think is the most unfortunate part about all this, is you had a chance to either be a bully, which he did, or prevent people from ever being bullied, which he did not. So, shrug. That's unfortunate with that. His empire, though, as a result of his tactics, is burning. And that is because his method of fixing things is to burn it all to the ground. And it's off-putting. And it's off-putting to people because the majority of us, we don't like cruelty. We don't like watching cruelty happen in real time. And how Elon has taken advantage of people and bullied people into doing things and impacted careers is cruel. Circling back to him, he was bullied, he became one, and this is now the perception that he has. I don't think he's all that much different than the awkward person that he comes out to be, the one that seems like he wants to have a good time, that wants to be fun, that wants to be liked. He's talked about having autism, but you don't get a pass for doing terrible things because terrible things happen to you. You don't get a pass to bully people because you were bullied, and you certainly don't get to use autism as an excuse for why maybe you do some of the dumb things that you do. Just not how it works. And people are getting wise to it, and rightfully so. So what has happened? A lot's happened. Twitter is a dumpster fire. It was a dumpster fire right when he took over, and it's been a dumpster fire since. And some people would be like, well, it's a place for free speech. It kind of always was. Like this misnomer that free speech doesn't come without potential consequences is how it's always been. It's just now it's got somebody who is a quote champion of the right now running it. But beyond that, there's bots. There's just a lot more things that you just don't want to see. I mean, beyond rhetoric that people don't like, there's a lot of disturbing content on there, and I'll probably just leave it at that people are posting and getting away with. But transitioning into Doge wasn't efficient, didn't really save anything. Everything was wildly overblown because when you have people getting rid of things that they don't understand, mistakes are going to happen, right? They had to hire pretty much most of the people they fired back, A, because the courts told them to, but B, like they fired a group of people who are responsible for managing our nukes. That is bootleg. That's a bootleg operation, and it just shows a fundamental misunderstanding of how not just the government works, but how functions in a business work, right? You can't run the government like a business, and you can't run a business by thinking you can just get rid of people and build it back up. So that's that. Tesla around the world is shrinking. You've got people who are willingly bailing, getting rid of Teslas, not to a whole lot of success. Dealerships aren't taking them. People aren't buying them. People are looking at other electric vehicle options. China's EV market is blowing up as a result of some of this too. But this is important because it does show other businesses what they shouldn't do. Emulate, don't replicate. But in this case, don't do either because everything that Elon has done doesn't work, right? And businesses at their core want the same thing that people do, which is people to like them. And people aren't going to like you if you do things like this. If we look at history, mass layoffs, they always rehire. So at a certain point, you realize you need people to work for you because you need people to run the automated machines, fix them, manage them, program them, the whole batch. That's the whole thing with AI too. And I've got an episode designed specifically for this, 2 episodes, is AI can't replace people if there's no people to train it. AI is not that smart. It has artificial in the name. And it cannot replace people. I will say this until my dying breath. AI cannot replace people if there's no people to train it. All right? So we'll leave that there. But I think also what we're seeing is people are loyal to what they want, not necessarily to a product or a name. And we've seen boycotts throughout history. We saw it with Bud Light. We've seen it with Target. We've seen it with just all these different places. Now we're seeing it with Tesla. But we're seeing it in a way that is impacting Tesla pretty significantly. Again, around the world, you look at numbers, sometimes up to 80% decline in terms of the sales, especially when you look at places like Europe. Elon failing, while it caused a lot of pain, is helpful, right? When you see powerful people faceplant on a stage like that, it's good. It's self-regulating because it teaches people not to try to do the same thing. If businesses wanted to do this, they now have a real incentive to not tick off a whole bunch of people or display cruelty in droves the way that Elon and Tesla has. So that's really it. Like, I don't really have a whole lot of strategy to talk about and share here. This is going to be a pretty quick episode. But when you look at all this, when you look at how people slash and burn, it's all for the purpose of saving money, which is great. But then what, right? If you are just taking the money, then you're compromising the asset, which is your business, just to get more money. If you don't have anything to reinvest it in, the money just doesn't go anywhere. And then again, at some point, you're just going to have to rehire everybody. And it's really going to be a net loss, because not only did you lose the productivity, potentially burn some customers, you're now going to have to spend a ton of money to get that workforce back. Laying people off, not good for economy or society. As somebody who has had to look for work, it's a very, very, very dark period when you are going through all the applications process. Not a good model. It is not a good model, and it is that much harder to get things back up to a baseline. Going back to earlier, the backlash to cruelty is we can see ourselves, right? When we see something awful happen, whether it's, well, we'll use things like a school shooting. That's a very extreme example, but when you see a mass shooting, a school shooting, something happen, we see our own mortality, right? That could be us, right? That is terrifying. So when we see people cavalierly fire somebody, mass layoffs, do all this, it makes us uncomfortable, because it's, oh God, could that happen? Could my job do that to me? And there's just not an appetite for it. Again, businesses, I will say this nicely, don't do this. There are so many other strategies that you can do to save money that don't involve slashing your entire workforce. There are ways to be efficient. You could hire, I don't know, a company like OIAS. Shameless plug, right? But you don't have to go this route. And I would wager to say that a lot of companies are not going to go this route, at least for a while, because we saw how epically it failed. So good for the American worker. We can be happy about that. All I got. As always, like, share, and subscribe if there's anything here that makes you want to engage with us more. As always, stay tuned, and thanks for listening.